Ah, I turned the camera on. Probably sooner than I should have. Anyway, I'm going to use this James Young Savant video to, just as a backdrop, I suppose, for some points I'll make. My misery and me, of course, is, I hope we're not going to have to just deal with his comments everywhere about all this religious crap. Atheists are so annoying. But I mean, yeah, it's just in every single comment. It's just all this desperate evasion of context again. He's going to be another one of these people that's never going to deal with the reality of our biology, the reality of the evolution of our intelligence, and more importantly, our sentient consciousness, and not deal with the instrumentality. It's as slimy and ugly as, a goopy worm. I mean, it really is. That's the origin of the function. And so yeah, it's almost like you do need kind of an extraordinary claim to justify any, it's really fantastic, trust me, kind of nonsense that sort of needs to be demonstrated in some sort of real way. So anyway, in James's video, he's cutting slack to the idea that happiness is real, joy is somehow real, some sort of the splendor is splendid kind of thing. And he's making the argument that, okay, yeah, he's conceding that there's some real kernel of real good. Good that's good without a bad. On its own. If you made it and you put it in the universe, it'd be a good idea to put that good stuff in the universe somehow, if you could extract it. And I'd first argue that you can't extract it from the whole of the consciousness, that we do, in fact, I'm going to argue, well, I guess I would argue it again, that this is just a relative thing. You have to be in a hole of some kind to see any light, to feel any advancement in your condition. And it's just part of what the psychology duping us and giving us an illusion. Just like the value itself, the feelings are so real, the sense of it is real. But it's not. It's an illusion of circumstance, and it's just putting you on a different place on the scale in terms of you don't really know what bliss is the problem. You don't know what complete bliss is, being completely relieved of all the psychologically negative energy. So I was going to sort of argue that what you think is comfort isn't really comfort. The real thing is even better than that, and you never get a taste of the real thing, because then you'd know how bad things were, and so then you couldn't enjoy things. So that's sort of the psychology playing with you, the puppet master evolution playing with you. So he used the word unfair, and I just think that's kind of an unfair word to use. Yeah. And so that's my major objection. He just says it's kind of unfair to say that these joys are garbage, are practically useless in terms of making any compensation for anything. But I'd say it's not unfair if I'm correct that they are in fact made out of tensions. And and it's all the tensions are all relative. If I'm stick a knife in you, your tensions are going to be immediate and obvious, and knife out is going to feel good, and you're going to be relieved not to have a knife. If you have a disease and you take a pill and the pill makes the disease go away, you're going to feel so elated. Even though you're not advanced in terms of you didn't win the lottery, you didn't you're going to feel like you won a lottery. And that's all joys and satisfactions and splendors is the resolution of things. And some of these things are just so, we've had them since the day of our birth almost, you could argue. That some of these gratifications are gratifications of long, little drips of water that have been dripped into the bucket very slowly. But there is a bucket that's full, and it's the emptying of that bucket that was just put in a little drip at a time, a little drip at a time. I'm saying the mechanism is something like that. You just have no clue how how negative your psychology really is, even when you're you're comfortable. There's all kinds of worries and tensions and crap that are wheeling in your subconscious, and they do, even when you're at your, you feel too good almost. Sometimes you have that sensation like, oh, I feel too good. And it's almost like your brain then uses the opportunity to say, well, what about, and what about, and what about, and oh, you have to get that done, and you have to do this, and you got that coming. So they're all there. It's just that you're not consciously aware of them. And so you have an illusion that your state is easier than you think it is. But there is an underlying tension that if you look for it, you can find it. If you just, analyze your condition, you can find the fact that there is a shutter that still needs to be smoothed. And that's what your brain is using to still keep you in the game, still making you believe there's a step better, there's a better place to be. So anyway, but the point is that bliss is essentially the absence of any of these negatives. So again, I don't think you could experience it without first experiencing the negative. So I just think that's where you're being unfair, in not acknowledging that the fundamental process of deriving comfort, it does require the creation of something called hunger and desire and a sentient, a feeling, a sensation of roughness, of non-smoothness, unslickness, a stickiness, however you want to describe this not quite rightness. So you mentioned art and music or something else, and that these feelings are somehow blah 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 blah, and that somehow his argument, I think, is more like the feeling isn't garbage, even though the thing might be garbage. But I can't be sure of that. But I would certainly argue the thing is garbage. Quite obviously, gorillas are horny for gorillas, and baboons are horny for baboons. I mean, things you wouldn't go near. So I think obviously all these things we derive pleasure from, the aesthetics, are very superficial in terms of how they're programmed, and you can program them anyway, and that's just conditioning. And there's nothing intrinsic in the thing that is pretty. I mean, I don't have anything pretty here to fiddle with, but whatever we would consider to be aesthetic are gained, nice colors or a nice mixture of colors or whatever. There's nothing intrinsic in the thing. It's just our reaction. We have a reflexive reaction. It reflexively reacts to that thing because it means something in our psychology, not because it means something in the real world. So it's like baseball or football. All these things would look ridiculous from a brain exposed to them from some sort of neutral position where they didn't, where they weren't programmed to understand them to be things people derive pleasure from, and competition and all that kind of ego crap. They didn't do if it wasn't natural for them to do the pick a side thing. We're just so good at we pick sides all the time. Almost every circumstance we're picking a side. I hope that wins. I hope the ground wins. I hope the sky wins. We're always picking sides all over the place. And take that nature out of the equation, it would just be seen for what it is, which is silly and stupid. And it doesn't have any intrinsic value, the thing itself. And people's enjoyment of it is just rubbing the belly, tickling, whatever. It's a sensual pleasure. Our senses are being pleased, but the gratification is base and crude and isn't any more complicated than shoving the food in your gob. It's consumption, reproduction, cannibalism, and addiction. And addiction is a big word here that maybe I have to talk more about. But it's the nature of our psychology, is to create the illusion that the heroin is valuable. The heroin isn't valuable. So anyway, yeah, it's not a video I liked much, and there was the tail end of it. He goes into some conversation about, you know, how people are talking past each other because of their personal experience, and that's sort of the subject that needs to be dealt with here. I mean, I've done so many videos on the difference between psychology and philosophy, and it's like there seems to be no progress made. I mean, apparently those videos have been a waste of my time, because they're not persuasive. People aren't getting the difference between how you understand the world in terms of how you've constructed the model. You know, when you write it down in sentences or something, maybe that's what I need to do, but I sort of have done that, and that hasn't seemed to make much of a difference. But it's hard to know what's really making a difference in people's heads. But the context, you know, so there was a little bit of that about how objective perspective. He made some remark that he would argue for a more complete perspective or something, but he kind of concedes there's no such thing as a subjective perspective, or it's, you know, that there's no what's the right word? I would just argue that it is you can draw it up as a schematic, and not only the world we live in, not only the billions of years of evolution, but the brain itself is schematically playing out. It's a machine. It's got wires essentially, and things that process, and they all are reflexive. They all have, you know, there's nothing funky in there, So yeah, I think it can be broken down, and so perspective would be just acknowledging that function. And I don't even think, like I say, I don't think you have to have the details to describe it. You don't have to detail a car, like to know the thickness of the paint and all this other mush, to know the basic function and its relevance in the universe. And we can understand the relevance of our function, the relevance of different components of our function, like psychology versus informed modeling. I mean, in the fact that our psychology feeds off models, you know, fantasies, narratives, other kinds of things like that, the fact that our psychology is feeding on it, feeding on our perceptions of optimism or pessimism, fear, worry, desire. I mean, these things are reactive to the models we play with in our imagination. But to not concede that there are models that we can construct where we can be disciplined in terms of, yes, we react to the model emotionally, but we're not allowing our emotions to define the model, to, well, you know, make that character 6 inches taller because I like tall people. You know, this kind of nonsense, where we start changing reality and changing the size and meaning of things to suit what we want to believe, what we want the model to do, because it's advantageous to what we desire. And so when our desire starts recoloring, restyling reality to suit our preferences, our personal preferences, that's where this all just becomes bullshit. And I think that can be seen in so many statements. And ironically, you know, well, just as it gets into the J stuff again, there's things that, you know, where you just say, how could somebody in that position not understand? How could somebody like work for years at a slaughterhouse and just not figure it out? And you're just saying, I mean, how could a guy be a black man and not have enough perspective to know that it was only ignorance? You know, that the subjective, the fact that we are like dependent, you know, that we are nepotistic, that we are discriminating based on kind by nature, is a fact. And the fact that we can easily overcome applying that as a prejudice by just acknowledging the truth, that it's an irrelevant difference, that the difference between football and baseball is not a significant difference. So you can still be an addict for football, but you can acknowledge that the baseball audience is doing the same thing you are. That the game is doing the same. They're getting the same comfort. Their comfort isn't a less legitimate comfort than your comfort. Even though there would be arguments with people, oh, football is a much better game than baseball because it's, you know, blah, 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 and it has this and it has that, and they would have this stupid, idiotic, inane argument about how to masturbate, essentially, and it's stupid. But yeah, like I said, I just don't know how you couldn't have enough perspective to realize that intelligence changes perception, that you have to see something as it is in context before you can emotionally react to it. You have to know what it is. You have to know it's just a kid in a costume on Halloween, right? If you didn't have knowledge that traditionally children disguise themselves as monsters on a day, you might think, holy shit, there's zombies loose. Holy shit, there's little monsters running around outside my house. Because you wouldn't have knowledge of why there's little monsters running outside your house, and that they're not real monsters, they're kids in masks. But you have to know that to be able to not react as if it were real monsters. I mean, you can't understand. I mean, this is just like so basic. And that's the difference between the projections of our psychology that wants something to be true and the knowledge that informs us of the truth. And again, I would argue that once you've acquired that knowledge, you can't eradicate it. Once you know how to add 2 plus 2, you can't come up with 5. You just can't do it. Once you know how to do it right, you can't do it wrong. And intelligence does that to our brain by creating principles that we just never will be able to see past. I could never be, aggressively racist. I don't know. I could never be a bigot in terms of seeing advantage or purpose by just uttering the Martin Luther King statement, okay? Judge a man based on the content of his character, not the color of his skin. How can you argue with a perfect piece of logic? It's a perfect piece of logic. Do unto others as you have others do unto you. I mean, it's not quite as direct, but it's a statement that you just can't deny the sensibility of it. You can't unravel. It's just perfectly sensible. And obviously people don't pay any attention to it because they apparently would want football players to impose on baseball players. They would want people to say it's okay. So again, so just I'm making this video too long now. But the subject of anti-natalism has a lot of arguments, okay? It's not just that life is stupid. It's not just that it's a biological process contrived to replicate a molecule and therefore has little potential to do anything productive. But yeah, the point is that it does lack these fundamental elements, these elements of things that you put in the category good thing. The things in the category good thing have to produce things like fairness and justice and deserve and consent. And life, procreating, doesn't have any of those elements. So it's automatically a non-starter just because it falls so short in providing those elements. How can you possibly impose? How can you possibly sanction giving somebody what they don't deserve? That's not a gift. Giving somebody unfairness, giving somebody just overtly violating your obligation for consent, your sensible requirement to acknowledge that they may not like what you're going to impose on them. It's like when somebody's unconscious giving them a tattoo. Who would do that? Would anybody think it's an honorable thing to do, to tattoo somebody when they're unconscious? Just because it happened to them? Let's say somebody gang tattooed you, and it worked out so well because you got a tattoo that you liked. Would you be ignorant enough to think you had a right to do the same thing to somebody else? I mean, that's really I think most people would know, no, that's really obnoxious and rude, and that's totally undefendable as civil behavior, because it's not going to be worth it when you do it to somebody who really isn't going to appreciate it, and is going to really find it obnoxious that you would degrade them that way. I personally find it an insult to be in a shitty world like this, a world run so fucking badly. All these liars and thieves and you've made kings out of, these loafers that you give all the money to, and they never did a day's work in their life. They didn't have to earn a damn thing, and they're going to tell other people to pull up their bootstraps. This is an obnoxious, disgusting, putrid world. And for my parents to think that somehow I would be pleased that they would tattoo me with being human, I find so obnoxiously rude. And I think if people gave it any kind of modeling, rational thought, and did fair category designation, they could figure out that yes, it is like, Old Fan just did a video about the drunk driver thing. Yes, it is drunk driving. Yes, it is obnoxious arrogance. Yes, it is gambling with somebody else's money. Yes, it is. It's a kind of rape. You're just taking because you want, and you're not worried about consent, and you're totally oblivious to some sort of notion of potential harm. You won't even acknowledge it. You'll nihilistically say it's not real. And this is a sensible context for conversation. This is an intelligent context. No. Sorry. So anyway, I was going to play some of this, but it just isn't that. I mean, I'll play some of it just to get a flavor of it.
An objective agent, an intelligent agent, looking at the life on Earth from a purely objective standpoint, would say that it is mostly inadequate. It is mostly functioning at a loss, and it's if your value is one side of the equation, you have the pleasure and enjoyment, the actualization and fulfillment, or just the positive feelings of dopamine or
Yeah, this isn't the best place to chime in. Sorry, I picked a bad spot. Yeah, I just think that once you open this door to the existence of some sort of real good, like you could really give the universe a present, like it's just so not dangerous, not harmful, it's just some sort of blissfully thing, you're just sort of opening the door for people to aggrandize that, to make a mountain out of that molehill, and to molehill the value of suffering into nothing. I don't think that's a reason not to believe it, so you're entitled to believe that there is such a thing. But to say that I'm being unfair, I think is inappropriate unless you have some sort of evidence of the unfairness. Where's the logical crime? I think it would be silly for me to say, to think, to believe that because something's laughing or in a blissful state for a few moments, that state is in itself a good. I mean, that it's not still just protecting the individual from their common bad state. I mean, I could almost argue that your video here, you're kind of a little slow, a little gloomy, you sound a little down, a little bit blah, blah, blah. You could be perfectly comfortable, but you're just not very energetic, you're not in any kind of bliss, you're not laughing in any kind of joy state. You're not in some sort of prison, but isn't that why you're saying it? It's because you're comparing it to something much worse. Yeah, I don't have cancer, and I feel damn good about that. And the more if I think about people with cancer, and I think about me not having cancer, I could get myself worked up into a pretty good ecstasy, couldn't I? I mean, if I really just did that right now, just thought about all the things I don't have, all the negatives, I could imagine my penis being 2 inches shorter, Holy shit. I can do things and then say, wow, I'm doing okay. Because I can make those relative perspective. I can just, and all I'm saying is no matter where you are, I think you're still relativizing. And that you really don't know what it is just to be completely relieved of the bullshit. To be completely cleansed of desire, need, tension, irritation, any need to do anything, to think even. But whatever. So I just think unfair is kind of bogus when I don't think. Hey, look, it's a complex subject. I'm just not liking the word unfair. You can certainly say there's enough uncertainty in the exact function of the mechanics of the sensation illusion being created in our brain, and what elements are in that sensation creation, and what value elements are real, quote unquote. But I don't think there's anything wrong with my fundamental theory that no, there's really only, just like with electricity and a lot of other things, there's really only negative. Okay, you gotta take, there's gravity, there's not acceleration, there's all kinds of different things, but yes, it's the repulsion is really attraction, or the attraction is really repulsion, but there is no such thing as two forces. There is no good and bad. There's just less bad. And when you take away the bad, you automatically get the good, especially in the sentient brain. But anyway, enough. Yeah, that's enough. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's a whatever. I mean, it's a. I just want to again stress that this is, in my opinion, this is a tiny component of the arguments to be made about antinatalism, because most of them, in my opinion, have to do with the fail-safe argument and the fact that there's no way to justify any of the harm when it's imposed without consent. So that's the real jeopardy here, is that you can't justify one cancer victim that is dissatisfied with their plight, that isn't giving you consent and saying, oh, don't worry, it's okay, I know, I got cancer, I'm unlucky, it's okay. Well, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying I didn't want your tattoo, I find it disgusting and revolting to be here, and I don't even have cancer. So in my opinion, you don't have the right to even fuck with me for what I consider to be the vacuous value of these people chasing their art, or chasing their orgasms, or chasing their beauty, or chasing their rubbish. Because all those things have no intrinsic value, and the only thing that really has any intrinsic value is migrating a sentient being from a negative state to a less negative state. And that's the only thing, migrating a sentient being from a negative state to a less negative state. And that's the only thing that has any value on this planet or in this universe, in my opinion. In my fair opinion. Yeah.